Hello, and welcome, dear listeners of Dark Whispers. Wherever this whisper finds you, in the hush of early morning, the stillness of dusk, or the deep hours when the world forgets to move, I'm grateful you've chosen to spend this moment with us. If you haven't already, be sure to follow Dark Whispers to discover more tales that echo long after the story ends, tales that blur the line between truth and shadow. Tonight's account is not fiction. It was recovered from a sealed military archive, declassified quietly in 1996, 3 years after its author met an untimely and still unexplained death. The writer was Lieutenant Commander Mason Hale, an officer in U.S. Naval Intelligence. What you're about to hear comes directly from his personal journal, a record of Operation High Jump, and of the ancient impossible things buried deep beneath Antarctica's frozen skin. Draw closer and listen well. U.S. Navy Intelligence Division. Classification: eyes only to be destroyed. Time frame: August 1946, March 1947. Entry 1, August 15, 1946. USS Pine Island, Norfolk. Naval Base. My name is Lieutenant Commander Mason Hale. If you're reading these pages, it likely means I'm no longer alive, and someone has uncovered what I was never meant to record. I write this because truth has a way of rising, no matter how deeply it's buried beneath ice or how long it's been suppressed. 3 days ago, I received orders that shattered every notion I held about our world. I was summoned to report directly to Admiral Richard Byrd for a top-secret briefing concerning something called Operation High Jump. The press is describing it as the largest Antarctic expedition ever assembled. 13 ships, nearly 5,000 men, aircraft carriers, and enough weaponry to invade a small nation, all for what's being framed as a research mission. The level of armament seems excessive. The briefing room was cold and clinical, filled with unfamiliar faces that nonetheless bore the unmistakable poise of the intelligence world. Admiral Byrd stood at the head of the table, his weathered expression grim as he spread aerial photographs across the polished surface. "Gentlemen," he began, his voice laden with restraint, "what I'm about to share stays in this room." He paused, allowing the silence to take root before continuing. Officially, Operation High Jump is a cold-weather training exercise. Unofficially, his eyes swept over us, sharp and deliberate. We're going to Antarctica to determine whether we're alone. The photographs mostly showed snow and ice, except for a few unsettling anomalies. Dark, unnatural shapes interrupted the white vastness. Geometric patterns that seemed artificial. One image displayed a metallic structure embedded in the ice, catching sunlight in a way that felt wrong. These were captured during reconnaissance flights in late 1945, Byrd continued. The Brazilian Navy has reported similar phenomena, disc-shaped objects moving at impossible speeds, emerging from and vanishing into the ice. He indicated marked coordinates. We've also recorded magnetic disturbances and unexplained radio interference in these regions. A colonel I didn't recognize leaned forward. "Sir, is this about the Germans? Everyone knows they had interests in that territory." Byrd's face darkened. "That's precisely what we intend to find out." He laid down another photograph, this one showing a vast ice formation with a clean, rectangular opening carved into its surface. "This image was taken 6 months ago. Look closely. Nature doesn't carve perfect rectangles into glaciers." A chill crept up my spine, and it had nothing to do with the cold. "Admiral," I asked, "what exactly are we expecting to discover down there?" He met my eyes. For the first time, I saw something in his gaze I'd never seen in a commanding officer. Uncertainty and fear. "We're not going down there to explore, Commander Hale," he said softly. "We're going to see who's already there." Entry 2, September 3rd, 1946. At sea, South Atlantic. The journey south has been calm, but there's a tension among the crew you can almost feel in the air. On a ship, word spreads fast, especially when it's not supposed to. Despite the tightest security, rumors are everywhere. Everyone understands this isn't just a wildlife survey. You don't deploy destroyers and carriers just to test winter gear. I've been assigned to the intelligence division aboard the Pine Island, reporting directly to Admiral Byrd. My responsibilities: analyze data, compile classified reports, and maintain secure communications with Washington. What they didn't tell me is that I'd be documenting what may either become the most extraordinary discovery or the most catastrophic cover-up in human history. Last night, I spoke with Admiral Byrd privately on deck. The Southern Cross shimmered above us. The ocean was unsettlingly still. He looked different outside the confines of protocol, less composed, more real. "Commander," he said, shielding his pipe from the wind, "I've been to both poles. I've witnessed things that never make it into official reports. Strange lights in the sky, radio signals from coordinates listed as empty, readings our instruments can't explain." He inhaled deeply and fell silent for a moment. "But this time, we have physical evidence." "Evidence of what, sir?" I asked. He didn't respond right away. He just stared out across the water. 2 decades ago, I'd have guessed Germans, secret engineering projects, some remnant of their wartime tech. But the war's been over for more than a year now, and activity in the region hasn't stopped. It's increased. "Then what do you think we're dealing with?" "I don't know, Commander, but I believe we're about to find out." He turned to me, and in the moonlight I saw something unsettling in his eyes. "Record everything, no matter how strange. Promise me." I gave him my word, without knowing the weight of what I was agreeing to. Entry 3, October 12th, 1946. Little America, 4 Base, Ross Ice Shelf. We've completed construction of our primary base on the Ross Ice Shelf, built over the remnants of Admiral Byrd's earlier expedition. The scale of this operation is staggering. Supplies and personnel prepared for 8 months, despite an official mission length of just 4. The numbers don't make sense. Unusual events began almost immediately. Just 2 days after we finished establishing the camp, our radio teams intercepted transmissions on frequencies unknown to modern equipment. The signals were encrypted, advanced, beyond anything our current technology can replicate. They originated deep within Queen Maud Land, the area once claimed by the Nazis as Neuschwabenland. Lieutenant Peterson, our lead radio operator, brought me several transcripts yesterday. His hands were visibly shaking. "Sir, I've been working with communications for over 15 years, he said. "I've never heard encryption like this. It's not just coded, it's foreign. And parts of it are in German, but not any standard dialect. There are terms and phrasing I've never encountered." I reviewed the recordings. Most of it was unintelligible, but one phrase came up repeatedly: Base 211. According to wartime intelligence, there were whispers that Nazi Germany had built a hidden Antarctic base with that designation. At the time, it was dismissed as propaganda. We were wrong. Byrd ordered immediate aerial reconnaissance over Queen Maud Land. The pilots returned with reports that may change everything we thought we knew. At an altitude of 15,000 feet, we observed several metallic objects emerging from beneath the ice sheet, approximately 200 meters inland from the Antarctic coastline. Admiral Byrd leaned forward slightly. "Describe what you saw, Commander." "Disc-shaped, sir. Each measured roughly 50 to 75 feet across, judging by the terrain for scale. They didn't move like any aircraft I've ever seen, no visible propulsion, no exhaust trails. and they went from a complete standstill to speeds exceeding 1,000 miles per hour in just a few seconds. The room fell into an uneasy silence. Johnson continued, "They came up directly through the ice, sir. Not from a structure on the surface, but from somewhere underneath. We counted 7 in total before they vanished into the low-hanging clouds." Admiral Byrd studied the photographs Johnson had taken. Even in monochrome, the shapes were clearly artificial, utterly foreign to anything in our known arsenal. Their surfaces were smooth, flawless, and eerily reflective, mirroring the icy terrain with unnatural precision. "Did they engage or react to your presence, Commander?" Johnson's expression darkened. "Yes, sir. They flew alongside us in formation for approximately 3 minutes before accelerating away. It felt like we were being observed." Later that evening, Admiral Byrd summoned me to his private quarters. His desk was covered with documents, photographs, maps, and reports I had never seen before. Some were dated as far back as 1943 and described similar phenomena witnessed by German U-boat crews in Antarctic waters. "Commander Hale," he said without introduction, "we're activating Project Silent Spear tomorrow. It's a classified reconnaissance operation targeting the exact coordinates where those craft were observed. I want you embedded with the strike team as our intelligence liaison." "A strike team, sir? I thought this was reconnaissance." Byrd's expression hardened. "We're going in armed, Commander. Whatever's down there has access to technology far beyond anything on Earth, and it's monitoring us. We need to understand its capabilities and intentions before it decides we're a threat. Looking back, I should have realized then. We weren't the ones conducting the hunt. We were walking directly into someone else's domain." Entry 5, October 20th, 1946. Grid location, 71 degrees south, 10 degrees west, Queen Maud Land. What occurred today will haunt me for the rest of my life. I'm writing this by flashlight inside an emergency shelter, hands still shaking. We've lost 3 men. 2 helicopters are destroyed, and we barely escaped, carrying evidence the world may never be ready to confront. Project Silent Spear launched at 0500 hours. Our team consisted of 2 helicopters, 12 Marines, and enough weaponry to flatten a fortified compound. The target, a glacial canyon located 300 meters inland, where aerial recon had identified what appeared to be artificial structures buried beneath the ice. The flight lasted roughly 2 hours, cutting through unstable weather systems. As we neared the canyon, our radios became filled with strange interference, fragments of voices, almost like whispers, speaking in an unknown language. Lieutenant Morrison, our pilot, reported multiple equipment failures as we entered Queen Maud Land. At 0715, we crested a ridge and saw it for the first time. The canyon extended for miles, its vertical walls too precise to be natural. Down below, nearly 500 feet, we could clearly see structures, geometric, metallic, and entirely unnatural. The architecture didn't resemble any human design. The surfaces bent light strangely, vanishing and reappearing in rhythmic pulses. But it wasn't the structures that truly stunned us. It was what came out of them. 3 disc-shaped craft, each approximately 100 feet wide, rose silently from concealed ports in the ice. They moved with impossible grace, ignoring the laws of motion and gravity. Their mirrored hulls reflected our aircraft perfectly, like living things staring back. "Command, this is Silent Spear 1, Morrison radioed. "We have visual confirmation of artificial structures and 3 unknown aerial vehicles, requesting immediate support." The reply came distorted and buried under heavy static. "Silent Spear 1, continue, document." That's when everything fell apart. One of the discs darted toward us, blindingly fast. I braced for impact, expecting weapons fire or an explosion. Instead, a beam of brilliant white light emitted from its underside, enveloping our helicopter. Instantly, every electronic system failed. Radios, instruments, engine controls, dead. Morrison did his best to keep us aloft as the craft entered auto-rotation, but we were falling fast. "Mayday! Mayday! We're going down!" Amid the confusion, I saw the second helicopter struck by the same beam. Their blades froze mid-spin. They dropped from the sky like a stone. I never heard their crash. Our own impact drowned out every sound. We hit hard, but level. Our skids plowed into the snow and ice. Morrison was unconscious, blood spilling from a gash on his forehead. Sergeant Williams and 2 other Marines were shaken but conscious. I grabbed the emergency radio and camera. We might only have moments before those things decided our fate. Then I saw one of them, up close. The disc hovered silently about 50 yards from the crash. It didn't land, didn't deploy landing gear. It simply stopped mid-air, 3 feet above the ice. Its surface gleamed like molten silver, seamless and organic. Strange markings covered it, symbols that shifted and pulsed like they were alive. They weren't German, they weren't human. The glyphs morphed before my eyes, hypnotic, unreadable, deeply alien. A section of the underside opened, not with the mechanical precision of a hatch, but with the smoothness of muscle tissue parting. Nothing stepped out. Yet I felt something, an intelligence. We were being scanned, studied, judged. The silence was profound, broken only by the wind and Morrison's shallow breathing. I raised the camera and managed to take 3 photos before Sergeant Williams grabbed my arm. "Sir, we need to go, now." He was right. Whatever occupied that craft had chosen not to destroy us. That implied either curiosity or a warning, and I wasn't about to test how far their patience extended. We built a makeshift stretcher for Morrison and began the slow climb up the canyon wall. The discs followed us silently, not attacking, but not leaving either. After nearly 6 hours, we reached the rim, where emergency recovery teams were waiting. The discs paused, hovering for several seconds, then shot into the clouds, disappearing faster than anything known to man. Admiral Byrd was waiting at the landing site. His expression was grim as he watched Morrison being loaded into the medevac chopper. Then he turned to me. "What exactly did you see down there, Commander?" I told him everything, about the canyon, the structures, the beam, the way they moved, the feeling we all had. He listened silently, nodding occasionally. "Did they attempt to communicate?" "No, sir," I said, then paused. "But it didn't feel hostile. They could have destroyed us instantly. They didn't. It felt like a message." Bird's gaze drifted toward the fog-veiled canyon. "A message," he repeated softly. "Yes, I believe you're right." October 25th, 1946. USS Pine Island, Emergency Conference. The last 5 days have been consumed by urgent briefings, encrypted messages to Washington, and frantic efforts to make sense of what we've uncovered. The photographs I took in the canyon have been analyzed by our top intelligence analysts, and their conclusions are as extraordinary as they are unsettling. The markings observed on the surface of the craft do not correspond to any known human language or script. According to our linguists, these are not ornamental. They likely serve a purpose, perhaps part of a communication system or interactive interface. The metal alloy comprising the exterior of the craft is equally baffling. It defies all known metallurgical classifications, displaying properties that simply should not exist based on any science we currently possess. More alarming, however, are the reports pouring in from other regions. Since our initial encounter, similar sightings have been documented by naval units across the Southern Ocean. One destroyer reported being followed for more than 30 minutes by a high-speed object that eventually descended beneath the ice. A submarine reported sonar contacts traveling at underwater speeds that no known vessel could achieve. But the most consequential development came yesterday, when Admiral Byrd received a direct message from Washington. I wasn't present for the initial meeting, but Byrd's demeanor afterward said everything. Our mission had changed. This was no longer reconnaissance. We were being ordered to withdraw. "Commander Hale," Byrd said as he summoned me to his quarters late that night, "there's something you need to understand. What we've discovered here will never be made public. The scope is too large, and the consequences too destabilizing." "With all due respect, sir," I replied, "don't the people deserve to know the truth?" Byrd gave a tired, humorless chuckle. 3 days ago, a message arrived through channels that shouldn't even exist. It was typed in flawless English. It contained mission specifics that only a few people on Earth should have access to. He handed me a single page. The paper itself felt strange, too smooth, slightly warm to the touch. Under the lamplight, the ink shimmered faintly, as though resisting the eye. The message read, "Admiral Byrd, your incursion into our domain has been observed. We harbor no intention of conflict. However, continued presence will be regarded as an act of aggression. Withdraw your forces beyond 60 degrees south latitude within 72 hours. This message is final." "Who sent it?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "The same force that's been monitoring us since day one," Byrd said. "The same ones who could have wiped out both helicopters but instead chose only to disable them. They're giving us a choice, Commander. The only question is, are we wise enough to take it?" November 2nd, 1946. Final operational meeting. Today, Admiral Byrd made a decision that would define not just this mission, but the rest of his career. Operation High Jump was officially terminated. All personnel were to be evacuated within 48 hours. Only essential equipment would be retrieved. Everything else would be left behind. Every record of what we had seen would be sealed under the strictest levels of classification. The explanation given to the press would mention unexpected weather conditions and equipment malfunctions. The truth would be buried so deep that even most of those who had lived through it would never fully grasp what they had been part of. At our last intelligence meeting, Byrd addressed a select group. 15 men who had seen enough to realize that humanity was not alone, and certainly not the most powerful force on the planet. "Gentlemen," he began, voice heavy with resignation, "what we've encountered here is not just an unknown technology. It is an intelligence capable of bending reality as we understand it. They are advanced, by decades, maybe even centuries. They have shown strength, yes, but also restraint." He looked each of us in the eye. "We were not merely told to leave. We were issued a warning, a line has been drawn, and I am convinced beyond doubt that they have the means to enforce it." Lieutenant Colonel Henderson, who had remained skeptical throughout the expedition, finally broke his silence. "Admiral, are we seriously going to allow them to dictate terms to the United States Navy?" Byrd's response was quiet, but resolute. "Colonel, in the past month we've lost 2 helicopters, 3 men, and 1 submarine that vanished after approaching the boundaries of their claimed territory. Every encounter has made one thing crystal clear. They could eliminate this entire fleet without lifting a finger. This is not surrender. It's survival. We're not backing down out of fear. We're backing away because we are outmatched." No one responded. The reality of our position settled over the room like a shroud. Everything we had been trained to believe about strength, security, and technological dominance had collapsed, buried beneath the Antarctic ice. "Sir," I said quietly, "what happens now?" Do we simply act like none of this ever happened? Bird turned toward the frost-covered window, staring into the white void that had revealed a hidden truth about our world. "Commander," he said without turning around, "what I'm about to tell you will never be documented. Before we leave, I intend to attempt direct contact with whoever or whatever leads them. I need to understand their purpose, their limits, and whether they intend to reach out to mankind again. Is that wise, sir?" "Probably not," he said, finally facing us. "But it's necessary. They've been watching us long before we were capable of noticing them. They've tolerated our presence so far, but the moment they see us as a threat, their tolerance could end. We must know, can peace coexist with this knowledge, or are we heading toward a future we can't prevent?" Still, no one spoke. The scale of it all was paralyzing. "One more thing," Bird added, reaching into his desk. "Each of you will be required to sign non-disclosure agreements. You will never speak of what you witnessed here. Your families will be told you participated in a standard cold-weather training exercise. Your official records will say nothing unusual." He placed a thick stack of forms on the desk. "I know this contradicts everything you believe in. It contradicts everything I believe in, but the alternative—" He didn't need to finish. We understood the alternative was chaos, global destabilization, or something even worse. How do you reveal something capable of unraveling the very fabric of society? How do you tell the world that we've discovered an advanced civilization beneath the Antarctic ice, one that possesses technology so far beyond our own that even our most powerful weapons are the equivalent of sharpened stones? We signed the documents. What choice did we have? November the 5th, 1946. Personal log, final entry. Today, Admiral Byrd initiated contact. I wasn't supposed to be present, but he requested I accompany him as a witness. We traveled by helicopter to a location transmitted through the same cryptic channel that had previously delivered the warning. The site was a featureless sheet of ice, about 50 miles from base, distinguished only by a perfect circle of disturbed snow. We landed on the perimeter and waited. The air was unnaturally still. The Antarctic wind, usually howling without end, had gone silent. The quiet was so absolute, so complete, it pressed down on us like a weight. 20 minutes passed before they appeared. 3 disc-shaped vessels emerged on the horizon, gliding toward us with their characteristic, physics-defying fluidity. They assumed a triangular formation above our position, hovering 10 feet above the ground. Their surfaces rippled with mirrored brilliance, flowing with symbols that pulsed gently with an internal glow. Then, for the first time, something new happened. From one of the crafts a ramp extended, not mechanical but organic, as if the ship itself had grown it. A figure emerged. Even now I struggle to describe what I saw. The being was humanoid, but clearly not human. Nearly 7 feet tall, its frame was familiar yet subtly wrong. Its proportions were uncanny, its skin translucent and faintly luminous, as though it carried its own internal light. The features were angular, elegant, unnervingly refined. Its eyes were vast, black, and ancient, like deep wells that had seen epochs pass. But most remarkable of all was the utter absence of hostility. The being radiated calm, perhaps curiosity, even empathy, but there was no aggression, no threat. It walked toward Admiral Byrd and stopped precisely 10 feet away. When it spoke, no sound emerged. The words came directly into our minds, clear, unmistakable, intimate, thought without voice. "Admiral Byrd, you have shown wisdom in honoring our request. Your species stands at a turning point. The decisions made in the coming decades will shape whether our contact becomes a gift or a necessity for your survival." Byrd held himself steady, though I could see the strain on his face. "What is it you want from us?" he asked. "We want nothing," the entity replied. "We have watched your species for thousands of years. Your recent mastery of atomic force has brought you to our attention in ways no previous achievement has. Power, without understanding, endangers not only your kind, but the balance of this world. Are you issuing a threat? We are offering clarity. Your operations in this region must cease. The knowledge gained here will remain contained. In exchange, we will continue to observe without interference. For now." The message was clear. They had monitored humanity for millennia. Only now, only with the splitting of the atom, had we become a concern worth addressing. "And if we refuse?" Bird asked. The being did not respond with anger. Its expression did not shift, but the temperature around us dropped several degrees in an instant. The silence grew thick, suffocating. "You are a young species, Admiral, and young species often fail to understand consequence. There are thresholds that must not be crossed. We have preserved the balance of this planet longer than your oldest civilizations have existed. We will continue to do so, with or without your cooperation." The transmission ended. The being returned to its ship. The ramp receded, seamless once more. All three crafts lifted into the sky and vanished, disappearing faster than thought. Bird said nothing during the return flight. Only after we were alone in his quarters did he speak. "Commander, I need a promise from you. If anything happens to me, if I disappear or die under strange circumstances, I want the truth to survive. Not the version that's written down, the real truth." "What are you planning, sir?" "I'm going to do exactly what they asked. We'll withdraw. We'll go silent. We'll stop all operations. But I'm also going to make sure someone, somewhere, knows what happened here. Because this isn't the end, Commander. This is the beginning." 3 days later, we left Antarctica. The official report cited equipment failures and worsening weather as the cause for early termination. On our return journey, Bird gave a brief interview to the Chilean press. He mentioned enemies capable of flying from pole to pole within minutes. His comments were dismissed as metaphor, a comment on aviation's future. But I knew better. He was trying to warn the world, in the only way he could, about what sleeps beneath the ice. Final log, Mason Hale. "I'm dying. The doctors say cancer. But deep inside, I believe it's something else, something connected to those days in Antarctica. It has been 47 years since I returned, carrying this secret. I've watched humanity inch toward the precipice the entity warned us about. Admiral Byrd died in 1957. With him vanished the last official link to the truth. He never spoke again of the encounter. He never returned to the southern continent despite ample opportunity. He understood, as I do, that some thresholds, once crossed, can never be reversed. I've watched for signs over the decades. Strange aerial sightings, sudden bursts in technology that seem to leap ahead without precedent. I believe they've been guiding us from the shadows, intervening when absolutely necessary. But their patience isn't infinite. The Cold War has ended, but new crises rise in its place. Environmental collapse, renewed nuclear proliferation, social fragmentation. The choices we were meant to learn from may have already been forgotten. I have kept this journal hidden for 47 years. I had hoped to find the right moment to share it. That moment never came. So now, if anyone ever finds these words, perhaps you'll be better prepared than we were, because they are still down there, watching, waiting, and the warning they gave to Admiral Byrd still stands. There is something beneath the ice, something that has safeguarded this planet long before humanity appeared. They gave us time to evolve, time to learn, to become wise enough to match our power with responsibility. Whether we've succeeded remains unclear. But next time, and there will be a next time, we may not be allowed to leave. The journal of Lieutenant Commander Mason Hale was found inside a safety deposit box in Phoenix, Arizona, in 1996, 3 years after his death from cancer. His nephew, David Hale, published portions of the manuscript online before the entire file mysteriously disappeared from all servers within 48 hours. 2 weeks later, David Hale was killed in a car accident. This version was reconstructed from archived fragments recovered from decommissioned servers and private storage. Its authenticity remains unverified. The United States Navy maintains that Operation High Jump was a standard training and scientific mission completed without incident. Admiral Richard E. Byrd's cryptic remarks to Chilean journalists, referring to a hostile force capable of flying from pole to pole in minutes, remain part of the public record. His subsequent removal from polar operations and his lifelong silence regarding the expedition have never been formally addressed. Antarctica is now governed by international treaty. All military activity is banned. No nation has attempted another expedition on the scale of Operation High Jump in the region where Mason Hale claimed these events occurred. As always, the truth remains buried beneath the ice. Tonight, I'll be your guide through one of the most chilling and enduring enigmas of the Cold War era. Imagine this. It's a frigid winter night in the Ural Mountains, sometime in early February of 1959. A group of young adventurers sits huddled inside a canvas tent pitched on the snowy slope of a remote peak, ominously named Dead Mountain. They laugh, scribble journal entries under flickering flashlight beams, and make plans for the next day's hike. They have no idea that this will be their final night alive. This is the true account of the Dyatlov Pass incident, a case that has baffled experts for more than 6 decades. My name is James, and for weeks I've sifted through case files, diaries, forensic reports, and witness statements in a search for answers. The deeper I dig, the more the Dyatlov mystery feels like a story teetering between grim reality and unsettling legend. Let's walk through it, step by step, as if we're reopening a long, cold investigation. Our story begins in late January of 1959. 10 seasoned ski hikers, most of them students at the Ural Polytechnical Institute, embarked on a trek toward Mount Otorten in the northern Ural Range. All were in their early 20s, 7 men and 2 women, led by Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old radio engineering student. The 10th member, an older and more experienced instructor, would turn back early. On January 23rd, the group received their route book and left the city of Sverdlovsk, modern-day Yekaterinburg, by train. Picture them riding through snow-blanketed landscapes, full of energy and excitement, perhaps even singing to the sound of a mandolin one of them had brought for the trip. 2 days later, they arrived in Ivdel, a small, remote town near a Soviet penal colony. From there, they continued by bus, then hitched a ride in the back of a woodcutter's truck to Vijay, the last inhabited settlement before the wilderness swallowed them whole. The residents of Vijay likely greeted the young hikers with a mix of admiration and quiet concern. Their planned route was classified as Category 3, the most challenging, and they intended to attempt it in February, the region's most brutal month. On January 27th, the group departed Vijay and began their journey into the wild. One member, Yuri Yudin, was struggling with chronic medical issues, rheumatism, and a spinal defect that caused persistent joint pain. By January 28th, his condition worsened, and he reluctantly turned back. In doing so, Yuri Yudin became the expedition's sole survivor. He would never see his friends alive again. The remaining 9 hikers continued into the vast, snow-covered wilderness. Thanks to recovered journals and undeveloped film rolls, Investigators were later able to reconstruct much of the group's final days. By January 31st, they had reached the edge of a highland plateau. There, they stashed extra supplies and food in a wooded area, preparing for their return journey. Spirits seemed high. They laughed, took photographs, and even crafted a satirical newspaper titled The Evening Otterton. One entry joked, "From now on, we know that the snowmen exist," a playful nod to local Yeti legends. On February 1st, they began ascending the pass that would eventually bear Dyatlov's name. Their objective was to cross through the pass and set up camp on the other side. But the weather turned against them. A fierce snowstorm set in, reducing visibility to near zero. They veered off course, unintentionally climbing toward the slope of Kolatsyako, which in the Mansi language translates to Dead Mountain. By the time they realized they were off track, it was too late in the day to retreat. Rather than descend to the forested valley below, only about 1.5 kilometers away, Igor Dyatlov chose to pitch their tent right there on the exposed mountainside. Perhaps he didn't want to lose the elevation they'd gained. Perhaps he wanted to prove they could endure a night in open conditions. Whatever the reasoning, the decision to camp in the open during a blizzard would later be scrutinized intensely. That night, February 1st, 1959, was bitterly cold. Temperatures plunged to around -20 degrees Celsius, with winds whipping across the slope at dangerous speeds. Inside the tent, the group prepared for sleep. They ate a simple hot meal. Forensic analysis would later confirm that food remained in their stomachs, indicating they dined sometime between 6 and 7 p.m. One of the final photos from their recovered cameras shows smiling faces as they settle into camp beneath a darkening sky. Despite the storm, morale seemed high. They wrote diary entries, joked with one another, and began winding down, unaware that horror was imminent. Sometime after midnight, during the early hours of February 2nd, something happened. Something no one witnessed, but that left behind evidence more disturbing than fiction. The tent was slashed open from the inside. The 9 hikers fled into the snow, leaving behind nearly all their gear: boots, coats, gloves, hats, sleeping bags, even axes and flashlights. Outside, it was -30 degrees Celsius, -22 Fahrenheit. Yet they ran, half-dressed and barefoot, into the blizzard. Why? What could possibly have terrified or forced 9 intelligent, experienced hikers to abandon their only shelter and expose themselves to the deadly elements? That is the question that has haunted investigators ever since. When the group failed to return by their scheduled date of February 12th, no immediate action was taken. Delays were not unusual for expeditions of this kind, but as days passed without any message, the hikers' families grew concerned. By February 20th, pressure from desperate relatives led to the launch of a formal search operation. The Ural Polytechnical Institute sent volunteer students to retrace the group's steps. Shortly after, the Soviet military joined the effort. Helicopters and planes combed the snow-covered wilderness. Blizzards continued to slow progress. Among the student volunteers was Mikhail Sharavin. On February 26th, he made a discovery that would shake the entire nation. While combing the slopes of Kolatsyako, Sharavin's team spotted a strange shape protruding from a snowdrift. As they moved closer, they realized it was part of a tent, collapsed and half-buried. Sharavin used an ice axe to force open the entrance, covered by thick snow. What he found inside defied logic. The tent had been sliced open from within. Snow had crept inside, but most of the group's belongings remained neatly arranged, untouched. Blankets, winter jackets, flashlights, boots lined in a row, a small stack of money, official papers and maps. In one corner, a plate of salted pork fat sat waiting, untouched, as if the group had been preparing a late-night snack. The scene was haunting, ordered, quiet, as if someone had pressed pause on a moment frozen in time. Sheridan would later say it looked as though the hikers had been calmly preparing for bed before suddenly bolting into the snow. The sense of something unseen, something inexplicable, hung heavily over the sight. And then there were the footprints. Outside the tent, searchers found clear tracks in the snow, left by bare feet and socks. Some showed only one shoe. The prints suggested the hikers had walked, not run, away from the tent, and yet they were never seen alive again. Would you like me to continue with the next part of the story, covering the discovery of the bodies and the mysterious injuries that deepened the legend? There were 9 distinct sets of footprints in the snow, matching the number of missing hikers. Some showed feet clad only in socks, others a single shoe, and a few completely barefoot, detailed enough that individual toes were visible, frozen into the surface. The tracks didn't suggest a frenzied flight. Instead, the hikers had moved quickly but in an orderly fashion, single file, descending the slope with purposeful urgency. The rescuers followed the trail downhill toward a dense patch of forest. Miraculously, the footprints extended for nearly 500 meters before vanishing beneath a fresh layer of snow. It appeared the group had intentionally headed toward the tree line, perhaps seeking shelter or attempting to regroup. Sheridan and the others were left grasping for answers. What could have driven these seasoned hikers, strong, intelligent, well-prepared, to flee their tent into deadly cold, some half-naked, walking calmly into the night? As night fell on February 26th, the search was temporarily halted, leaving the rescuers deeply unsettled by the scene they had just uncovered. The following day, search teams expanded their efforts, working outward from the tent toward the forest. At the edge of the woods, beneath a towering Siberian cedar, Sheridan's group made a chilling discovery. Near the charred remains of a small fire lay the bodies of 2 men. Yuri Doroshenko and Georgy Yuri Krivonishenko were found side by side in the snow, barefoot, wearing only their undergarments. The branches of the cedar above them were broken up to a height of 5 meters, as if someone had climbed the tree, perhaps trying to locate the tent in the dark, get a better vantage point, or escape an unknown threat. Bits of skin and torn fabric were embedded in the bark, indicating the climb had been frantic, possibly desperate. Krivonishenko's body bore burns on his limbs. More disturbingly, a piece of flesh was missing from his right hand. Later, analysis revealed he had bitten off part of his own knuckle, possibly in a desperate attempt to remain conscious or as a reflexive act during the final stages of freezing to death. Both men had severe frostbite. Their extremities had turned a dark, reddish-brown, indicating prolonged exposure to sub-zero temperatures. The small fire they had built had long since burned out. The cedar's branches had been stripped for fuel, but it hadn't been enough to save them. The image of 2 young men crouched around a dead fire, slowly succumbing to the cold beneath an endless, indifferent sky, is one that remains deeply unsettling. Roughly 300 meters uphill, in the direction of the tent, searchers located Igor Dyatlov's body. He was lying on his back in the snow, his head turned toward the slope, as though trying to crawl back to camp. Dyatlov was more clothed than the 2 near the tree. He wore a flannel shirt, a sweater and pants, but lacked boots or a coat. Only socks covered his feet. One of his arms was frozen upright, reaching toward the sky. In that hand, he clutched a small birch branch. His other hand rested against his chest. Some speculated he may have been protecting something, perhaps a photograph or journal, though nothing was found inside his clothing. His face was calm, his eyes still open, gazing upward through the blowing snow. Not far from Dyatlov lay the body of 22-year-old Zenaida Kolmogorova. She was better dressed, wearing 2 sweaters and 2 pairs of pants, but, like the others, she had no boots, only socks. Her body was positioned facing the tent, arms bent and outstretched, as if she had been crawling uphill, trying desperately to reach shelter before the cold overtook her. A long, deep bruise stretched across her torso, consistent with blunt force trauma. Investigators compared it to the kind of injury caused by a baton or rifle butt. Oddly, there were no other visible wounds. It wasn't until March 5th that searchers found the 5th body, Rustem Slobodin. He lay face down in the snow, approximately 480 meters from the cedar, almost halfway between the tree and the tent. Slobodin, age 23, was dressed more warmly than some of the others. He wore a long-sleeved undershirt, a sweater, 2 pairs of pants, 4 layers of socks, and a single boot on his right foot. His left foot was wrapped only in a sock. His head was uncovered. A closed pocket knife was clenched in his right hand. His autopsy revealed a significant skull fracture, approximately 7 inches in length, resulting from blunt trauma. Strangely, the injury had not been immediately fatal. The examiner believed Slobodin had remained mobile for nearly an hour after sustaining the blow. Like Dyatlov, Kolmogorova, Doroshenko, and Krivonishenko, Slobodin's official cause of death was hypothermia. All 5 of the first bodies discovered showed no fatal external injuries. They had frozen to death in the brutal cold of the Ural winter. Slobodin's wristwatch was found shattered, the hands frozen at 8:45. Whether this marked morning or evening, or even the correct day, remained uncertain. It was as though time itself had stopped. Now imagine being Yuri Yudin, the lone survivor, called to identify the bodies of his friends, one after another. The corpses were transported by air to the Ivdel morgue for autopsy. Yudin, devastated, confirmed each of their identities, but 4 hikers were still missing. Weeks passed. The search dragged on. As the spring sun began to thaw the mountains, the melting snow revealed new horrors, pushing the Dyatlov case from mystery into something far more disturbing. On May 4th, a Mansi tribesman named Kurikov was assisting the search effort with his dog. Near a remote ravine, about 75 meters beyond the cedar and approximately 1,500 meters from the tent, the dog picked up a scent. There, near the edge of the ravine, searchers found scraps of torn clothing hanging on a tree branch. Digging through nearly 4 meters of compacted snow, they made a gruesome discovery. They had found the final 4 victims, buried in a snow-filled ravine, hidden beneath the forest floor. Lyudmila, Luda, Dubinina, Semyon, Alexander, Zolotaryov, Nikolai Thibault-Brignol, and Alexander Kolevatov. All 4 were located roughly 75 meters deeper into the woods than the cedar tree, their bodies clustered together at the bottom of the ravine. These 4 were dressed more thoroughly than the others. In fact, it appeared that they had scavenged clothing from their deceased companions in a last effort to survive. Dubinina, for example, wore Krivonishenko's burned and torn brown pants. Part of his wool sweater had been wrapped around her foot. Zolotaryov, aged 38, wore Dubinina's faux fur hat and coat. Kolevatov had layered additional sweaters and pants, likely taken from the others. This exchange of garments painted a grim picture. Those who perished first had been stripped for warmth by those still clinging to life. But what truly unsettled investigators was the condition of these final 4 bodies. Unlike the first 5, 3 of the 4 had suffered devastating, fatal injuries. Nikolai Thibault-Brignol's skull had been crushed, an 8-inch fracture that suggested an impact of immense force. Dubinina and Zolotaryov both had severe chest trauma. Dubinina's ribs had been shattered, 10 broken in total. Zolotaryov had 5 ribs fractured on one side of his chest. The forensic pathologist concluded that the force required to cause such damage was comparable to a car crash, blunt trauma of extreme magnitude, yet there were no visible wounds on the skin, no bruising, no lacerations. It was as if they had been crushed by immense pressure, with the force concentrated entirely within. This wasn't the result of falling debris. It wasn't avalanche damage. It was something else, something still unexplained. Alexander Kolovatov, the fourth found in the ravine, had a less definitive cause of death. He suffered a broken nose, an open wound behind his ear, and what appeared to be a twisted neck, but none of his injuries were deemed immediately fatal. It is believed that, like the others, he ultimately succumbed to hypothermia, perhaps after sustaining trauma that left him incapacitated. Would you like me to continue with the final autopsy findings, theories, and the strange circumstances surrounding the official investigation? And then came the gruesome details, ones that helped seal the Dyatlov Pass incident in infamy. All four of the bodies recovered from the ravine exhibited soft tissue damage to the head and face, injuries not present on the other victims. Lyudmila Dubinina was missing her tongue, both eyes, sections of her lips, and even part of her skull. Semyon Zolotaryov's eye sockets were empty. Alexander Kolovatov had lost his eyebrows entirely. These shocking discoveries ignited a wave of speculation. Had the group been attacked by someone or something capable of such horrific mutilation? Medical professionals, however, offered more practical explanations. The bodies had been found in a stream bed and likely exposed to flowing water, ice, and scavengers during the 3 months they lay undiscovered. This environment, they argued, could explain the decomposition and soft tissue loss. In Dubinina's case, the autopsy revealed approximately 100 grams of coagulated blood in her stomach, suggesting her heart was still beating when her tongue was removed. This implies that the wound occurred shortly after death, or perhaps even moments before it. As disturbing as these details are, investigators ultimately classified them as post-mortem, attributable to natural processes rather than inflicted violence. Still, once these findings reached the public, they fueled wild speculation, ranging from secret military executions to animal attacks or supernatural forces. Suspicion deepened when it was revealed that Zolotaryov had a camera around his neck, one that hadn't been listed with the others found in the tent. Even more curious, he held a pen and notepad in his hand, as if attempting to record something at the moment of his death. Yet the paper was blank. Back in 1959, investigators were overwhelmed by the mounting anomalies. A criminal inquest was launched as standard procedure, particularly given the traumatic injuries some of the victims had sustained. Initially, blame turned toward the Mansi people, indigenous reindeer herders who lived in the region. Authorities theorized that the hikers may have trespassed on sacred land and been killed in retaliation. But this idea was quickly dismissed. The only footprints found belonged to the hikers themselves. There were no signs of struggle, no evidence of external aggression. In fact, the Mansi had assisted in the search and had no history of violence toward outsiders. Next came the avalanche theory. Perhaps a sudden slide of snow had driven the hikers to flee their tent in a panic, but the tent had remained partially upright. The footprints were visible for hundreds of meters, and there was no clear evidence of a snowslide at the campsite. We'll return to this theory in more detail later. The idea of a wild animal attack was also considered and quickly discarded. There were no predator tracks. The injuries were inconsistent with claws or teeth. In the end, Soviet investigators concluded that no other humans were involved in the group's deaths. One forensic expert famously stated that the injuries sustained by Dubinina and Zolotaryov required a force beyond human capability. No human, he said, could have inflicted such damage. Then came a revelation that added a distinctly Cold War twist to the case. When analysts tested the hikers' clothing, they found elevated levels of radiation, specifically on Dubinina's brown sweater and Krivonishenko's wool trousers. This was an unexpected and deeply puzzling discovery. Radiation is not something typically measured in a hiking investigation. It was only detected because one of the investigators had access to a Geiger counter. The finding gave rise to dark theories: secret weapons testing, classified technology, or exposure to nuclear material. But further inquiry revealed a more mundane possibility. Yuri Krivonishenko had previously worked at the Mayak nuclear facility and had helped contain the aftermath of the Kishtim disaster in 1957, one of the world's worst nuclear accidents. Some of his clothing may have retained residual contamination from that time. Alexander Kolovatov, too, was no stranger to radiation. He studied nuclear physics and worked at a classified institute in Moscow. He may have worn clothing previously exposed to radioactive material. In short, the radiation traces may have been unrelated to the Dyatlov incident, a coincidental but misleading anomaly. Still, the families remained troubled by other unsettling reports. Some of the bodies appeared to have unnatural tans. Several relatives claimed that the victim's hair had turned gray. These claims only stoked public suspicion, reinforcing fears of radiation or chemical exposure. Officials dismissed these observations, attributing the tanning to natural mummification caused by the cold and sun, and explaining the hair discoloration as a side effect of decomposition or embalming. But to grieving parents in 1959, hearing words like radioactive clothing and orange skin felt more like a science fiction horror story than official reassurance. By May, the investigation was running out of time and patience. Lead investigator Lev Ivanov faced mounting pressure to close the case. In his final report, Ivanov concluded that the hikers had died as a result of the effects of an unknown compelling force. It was a vague, haunting phrase, a bureaucratic admission of complete uncertainty. No culprits were named, no arrests were made. The case was quietly marked classified and shelved. For the next 3 years, the Dyatlov Pass area was declared off-limits to hikers and researchers. The official reason? To prevent another tragedy. The unofficial one? To keep the curious at bay. The phrase, unknown compelling force, became a symbol of the case's enduring mystery, a riddle that only raised more questions with every attempt to answer it. 9 lives were lost, and the official response was, "You will never know why." This was the Soviet Union in 1959. When the party, or the KGB, told you to stop asking questions, you stopped. But not everyone accepted silence. Zina Kolmogoreva's mother and Igor Dyatlov's family reportedly received subtle threats. "You will never learn the truth," they were told, "so stop asking." And so, their children were buried, without clarity, without closure. The Dyatlov Pass incident faded into whispered memory, a ghost story told in Soviet mountaineering circles and behind closed doors. As for Yuri Yudin, the lone survivor, he carried the weight of uncertainty for the rest of his life. The guilt of survival. The suspicion that the truth had been buried. He never accepted the official explanation. In his final interviews before his death in 2013, Yudin publicly voiced what he had long believed, that the government knew more than it ever revealed. He even speculated that the group may have been removed from the tent at gunpoint, that Dubinina's tongue had been cut out because she was outspoken, because she said something someone didn't want repeated. He admitted he had no definitive proof, only decades of reflection, and an unshakable sense that something had gone terribly wrong, something unnatural. Whether his suspicions were justified or not, Yuden's testimony reveals just how deeply this mystery embedded itself in the lives it touched. And so we arrive here, decades later, still searching, still asking questions. As a modern investigator, I find myself flipping through yellowed documents and faded photographs, surrounded by fragments of a story frozen in time. And as I sift through the evidence, I swear I can feel that same cold wind blowing down from the slopes of Dead Mountain. The Dyatlov Pass case endures precisely because it exists at the threshold between the explainable and the unknowable. Over the years, countless theories have emerged, some rooted in science, others in conspiracy, a few in the paranormal. Let's examine them, one by one, like branching paths in a detective's notebook. And remember, any truly credible theory must account for all the evidence we've explored. The slashed tent, the barefoot flight, the internal injuries, the radiation, the strange lights in the sky, and the wall of silence that followed. That's a tall order. But the first theory, one that Russian authorities eventually endorsed, takes us back to the mountain itself. The avalanche. For many, this is the simplest and most plausible explanation. Imagine the scene. The Dyatlov group is asleep in their tent, pitched on a snowy mountain slope, when, without warning, a heavy slab of snow shifts and slides from above. The tent begins to collapse. They hear the ominous rumble of snow moving, feel the tremble in the earth. Panic sets in. They believe an avalanche is moments from swallowing them whole. Convinced they have only seconds to act, they grab a knife and slash their way out of the tent. The main entrance may be blocked by snow or frozen shut, and in a true emergency, the side wall is the fastest escape route. Wearing only what they had on at that moment, they flee into the night. This theory gained renewed credibility when, between 2019 and 2020, Russian authorities reopened the Dyatlov Pass investigation and officially concluded that a slab avalanche was responsible. That same year, a group of scientists published computer modeling that supported the viability of this scenario. The main strength of the avalanche theory is that, through this lens, the hiker's behavior no longer seems irrational. If you believe you are about to be buried alive, slashing the tent and escaping downhill becomes not only logical, it's your only chance at survival. According to this theory, a compact slab of snow, possibly dislodged by strong winds or residual heat from the group's stove, slid down the slope, striking part of the tent and causing loud cracks and vibrations. The hikers, all experienced, recognized the danger and initiated an emergency evacuation. They exited through the cut fabric and moved swiftly downhill, aiming for the forest below, where they could find shelter and regroup. They didn't stop to dress fully or collect supplies because time was against them. In their minds, every second mattered. Avoiding the danger zone was paramount. So they descended nearly a mile, through wind and snow, toward the tree line. There, they attempted to survive. Evidence of this remains in the fire pit beneath the cedar tree. They also excavated a snow shelter. The ravine, where the last 4 bodies were found, had branches laid across its base, suggesting the foundation of a crude den. Perhaps an improvised snow cave meant for insulation and protection. New story: the disappearance of Malaysia. Airlines flight 370. My name is Daniel Rhodes. For 32 years, I worked in national intelligence, NSA, CIA, and a few programs without official acronyms. I spent my life combing through redacted reports and listening between the lines. When I retired in 2012, I thought I had left the shadows behind. I believed I could finally sleep without wondering what lurked in the blind spots of geopolitics. Then, Flight MH370 disappeared, and sleep became a distant memory. March 8, 2014. 12:41 a.m. local time. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 pushes back from Gate C1 at Kuala Lumpur International Airport. At the controls, Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, 53 years old, over 18,000 flight hours, and First Officer Farik Abdul Hamid, 27, recently certified on the Boeing 777. Together, they carried 237 people, passengers and crew, on a routine 6-hour flight to Beijing Capital International Airport. The flight proceeded without issue for the first 38 minutes. Then, at 1:19 a.m., came the final voice transmission from the cockpit. "Good night, Malaysian 370. Less than 2 minutes later, the aircraft's transponder went silent. On secondary radar, MH370 vanished, erased from Malaysian airspace, leaving nothing but a blank sky. For the next 4 hours, air traffic control tried to make sense of it. Calls were made, systems rechecked. Assumptions leaned toward technical failure, weather interference, radar faults, or something else far more mundane than what was actually unfolding 35,000 feet above the South China Sea. The plane hadn't crashed. It hadn't exploded. It had simply vanished, off every radar, screen, and system built to track commercial aircraft across one of the most heavily monitored corridors in the world. But here's what wasn't made public. Not in those critical early hours. MH370 didn't just vanish from Malaysian radar. It dropped off secondary surveillance in 3 different countries at almost the exact same time. The statistical odds of that are nearly zero. I didn't learn this from CNN or from official reports. I learned it 6 months later via a phone call. The caller identified himself only as Mitchell. I hadn't heard his voice since a classified briefing in Langley back in 2009. "Danny," he said, using a nickname known only to 5 people alive. "You still got that clearance?" "Retired," I replied, "not revoked." "Then look at Diego Garcia," he said, "and stop trusting the satellite data." Then he hung up. Mitchell had never been a man of many words, but even for him this was cryptic. Diego Garcia, a U.S. military outpost in the British Indian Ocean Territory, one of the most secure and secretive installations on Earth. What could a missing Malaysian passenger plane have to do with a base that officially didn't exist on any congressional oversight report? I spent a week trying to forget the call. I was retired. I had a quiet house in Vermont, a garden, and a pension built on 30 years of secrets. But his voice kept repeating in my mind, like a fire alarm at 3:10 a.m. So I started digging. First, I found that Diego Garcia is approximately 2,400 miles southwest of MH370's last confirmed location, well within range of a Boeing 777 carrying a full fuel load. Second, I identified a suspicious gap in radar coverage, an area I began calling the Southern Silence Corridor. It stretches between Indonesian airspace and the southern Indian Ocean, where both civilian and military radars leave a massive blind spot. A gap large enough to conceal a plane the size of a city block. Third, I uncovered something that changed everything. Inmarsat, a British satellite communications firm, had quietly logged a series of electronic handshakes from MH370. Despite losing radar contact, the aircraft continued exchanging automated pings with the satellite for 6 hours and 11 minutes after vanishing from secondary radar. 6 hours. The plane hadn't plunged into the South China Sea, as initially believed. It had continued flying, on a path that led far from its intended course. Eventually, international investigators acknowledged the Inmarsat data, but only after Malaysian officials had spent weeks searching in the wrong ocean. By the time the search was redirected to the southern Indian Ocean, any potential wreckage had likely been dispersed by wind, current, and time, across an area roughly the size of the continental United States. But I had access to something most reporters and analysts didn't: a network of former intelligence operatives who still owed me favors. Would you like me to continue with the next phase of the MH370 investigation, into what the satellite data really suggested, and why Diego Garcia may have played a role? I obtained copies of the original Inmarsat data, complete with technical annotations that had been redacted from the public version. What I discovered in those margins made my hands tremble. The satellite pings revealed something extraordinary. Flight MH370 had not simply flown south into the ocean and crashed. The data showed deliberate altitude changes and multiple course corrections, clear indications of active control well into the flight's final hours. Even more unsettling, the timing of the ping intervals suggested that, at several points, the aircraft appeared to be flying in holding patterns, circular routes in the sky, as if awaiting instructions or clearance to land. I cross-referenced the ping logs with maritime traffic records from Indian Ocean shipping routes. On the night of March 8, 2014, there was a notable absence of commercial vessels along MH370's projected path. Ships that should have been present based on filed routes had either delayed their departures or deviated from course entirely. It was as though a corridor had been cleared, an open lane carved through one of the world's busiest maritime regions. And then I came across the eyewitness accounts. In September of that year, residents of Kuta Huvadhu, an island in the Maldives, reported seeing a low-flying aircraft around 6:15 a.m. local time on March 8th, approximately 6 hours after MH370 had vanished from radar. Witnesses described a large white plane with red markings consistent with the Malaysia Airlines livery. It was flying abnormally low, heading southwest, toward open ocean. Initially, the Maldivian government launched an investigation, but without warning, the inquiry was shut down, classified, and buried. Officials dismissed the reports, claiming the witnesses had likely seen a domestic aircraft and were mistaken. But I knew something they weren't sharing. There were no scheduled domestic flights over Kuta Huvadhu at 6:15 that morning. The island's airstrip had been closed for runway maintenance since March 5th. The only aircraft scheduled to depart from Malé on March 8th, a Maldivian air taxi flight, was not due to take off until 7:30 a.m. and was headed in the opposite direction. Southwest of Kuta Huvadhu lay 800 miles of uninhabited ocean, and then Diego Garcia. At this point, I began assembling a timeline, the kind of pattern analysis I hadn't done since my days in intelligence. It quickly became clear that Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 had not crashed at sea. It had been diverted, intentionally, along a carefully plotted route designed to avoid radar, sidestep maritime detection, and eliminate visual witnesses. And yet, something slipped through. A handful of islanders looking skyward at the wrong, or perhaps the right moment. But why? Why stage the disappearance of a commercial airliner, sacrificing 239 innocent lives? The answer didn't lie in the aircraft. It lay in the passenger manifest. Every intelligence analyst is taught to look for patterns, hidden alignments beneath the surface of seemingly unrelated data, and MH370's manifest held several. 20 passengers were employees of Freescale Semiconductor, a U.S.-based company specializing in microprocessors and embedded electronic systems. They were en route to Beijing for a technical conference, reportedly carrying laptops and sensitive materials related to advanced radar and stealth technology. Among them was Dr. Chen Wei, the lead engineer on a classified Freescale project codenamed Mirror, a system designed to manipulate radar signatures in real time, essentially rendering aircraft invisible to detection. Additionally, 4 passengers boarded the plane using stolen Austrian and Italian passports. The thefts were documented within days, but the true identities of those using the documents were never confirmed. According to Interpol, the tickets had been purchased in cash via a travel agency in Bangkok. No verified contact information, no digital trail. And then there was Yan Luo. Officially listed as a software consultant traveling from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing, Luo was far more than he appeared. According to restricted files I accessed through undisclosed sources, he was a former cyber analyst for the Chinese military, specifically the 3rd Department of the People's Liberation Army, China's counterpart to the NSA. He had been developing quantum encryption algorithms designed to resist even next-generation Western surveillance tools. 6 months before the disappearance, Luo had quietly approached the CIA through an intermediary. He expressed his intent to defect and claimed to possess quantum-resistant encryption protocols, formulas that, if valid, could render most existing intelligence-gathering techniques obsolete within a decade. Negotiations with Luo began in December of 2013, but quickly hit snags over exfiltration logistics, finances, and the safety of his family, who remained in mainland China. What Luo didn't know was that his communications had already been intercepted. The NSA's Special Collection Service, operating from the U.S. Embassy in Kuala Lumpur, had been monitoring him since October of that year. They had logged every transmission, tracked every movement, and flagged every data packet he sent. I spent weeks reconstructing what the intelligence community likely knew in the days before MH370 vanished. What emerged was a picture of convergence, an alignment of assets, information, and strategic interests that made the aircraft's destruction not merely plausible, but advantageous. Freescale Semiconductor's largest investor was a private equity firm called Jacob Partners, a financial entity that had received extensive DARPA contracts and funding streams earmarked for experimental stealth systems. The Freescale employees aboard MH370 weren't just engineers. They were carriers of intellectual property, prototypes, code, schematics for radar-defeating electronics. And Yan Luo's encryption research, if legitimate, represented a generational leap in cyber capability, potentially shifting the global balance of intelligence dominance. A single aircraft, departing from a region with weak oversight, headed to Beijing, carrying on board not just critical technology, but the minds capable of advancing it. The odds were beyond coincidence. And then there was one final clue, something I couldn't ignore. 3 weeks before MH370 vanished, a Boeing 777 identical in configuration was photographed at Diego Garcia during a rare commercial satellite sweep. The aircraft was parked in a military-grade maintenance hangar, one normally used for U.S. operations. Through private back channels, I obtained high-resolution versions of the images. The plane's external antenna array matched that of MH370 precisely, down to the tail number configuration. Someone had prepared in advance, cleared flight corridors, positioned naval and satellite assets, created a logistical pathway for an aircraft to disappear, cleanly, surgically without trace. All that remained was the right opportunity. A flight carrying passengers and technologies whose removal from the global stage would serve multiple national interests. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 did not suffer a catastrophic mechanical failure. It did not go down in a freak accident. It was intercepted, rerouted, and removed. Would you like me to continue into the next section, covering what may have happened aboard the plane after contact was lost, and how the Diego Garcia theory connects to U.S. military protocol and electronic warfare exercises active in March of 2014. The aircraft had been commandeered by the most advanced intelligence network on the planet, utilizing techniques few could comprehend, let alone believe if told. But the operation didn't end with the plane's disappearance. That was merely the beginning. In November of 2015, 18 months after MH370 vanished, I received an encrypted email from an unfamiliar address. The message contained only a phone number and a cryptic phrase: Hangar 7. Test Flight 847. I stared at the screen for 10 minutes, trying to process what I was seeing. Hangar 7 was a facility at Boeing's Everett plant where experimental avionics systems were routinely tested. Test Flight 8. 4. 7 was a name I recognized from a classified briefing years earlier, an initiative centered on developing optical camouflage technology for military aircraft. I dialed the number. Mr. Rhodes, the voice was cautious, mid-40s, with a slight southern drawl. My name is Marcus Webb. I used to work for Boeing. I think we need to talk. We met 3 days later at a quiet roadside diner near Everett, Washington. Webb was thin and pale, carrying the tired, haunted demeanor of a man who had borne secrets for far too long. He had served as an avionics technician at Boeing for 15 years, focusing on experimental communications and stealth technologies. In 2013, he was assigned to a classified program referred to internally only as Ghost Protocol. They told us we were developing stealth for next-gen military transport planes, he explained, nervously stirring sugar into his coffee. High-altitude optical masking. The idea was to make an aircraft invisible, not just to radar, but to human vision, by manipulating its electromagnetic signature in real time. The system functioned via a mesh of embedded transmitters and sensors in the aircraft's fuselage. These components would detect incoming radar, calculate the signal profile, and emit counter frequencies that essentially erased the plane's radar signature. Meanwhile, optical sensors captured the sky and terrain above and below, projecting that imagery onto advanced exterior panels, creating a visual illusion of transparency. We ran 2 tests, Webb continued. The first was a limited success. We got about 60% radar suppression and maybe 40% optical camouflage. But the second test... He trailed off, staring into his cup. The second time, the aircraft disappeared completely. We lost radar lock. Visual observers couldn't see it. Even GPS telemetry went dark. For 8 minutes, we had no idea where a fully equipped Boeing 777 was flying, inside restricted airspace. Eventually, the aircraft reappeared, but it had suffered what the final report called cascading avionics failures. The project was immediately frozen, all assets locked under high-security clearance, and Webb was denied further access. Still, he had managed to retain copies, technical diagrams, sensor logs, internal emails. They made us sign new NDAs 6 months after the project ended, he said. That's when I knew something was wrong. Then MH370 disappeared. The radar loss, the silence, the way it just vanished, it mirrored our second test exactly. Webb believed the Ghost Protocol tech had been covertly installed on MH370, either during scheduled maintenance or through unauthorized modification. The sudden disappearance wasn't due to a routine transponder shutdown. The aircraft had been rendered electronically invisible. But why? I asked. If the aim was to steal data or people, why not just detain them after landing in Beijing? Why hijack an entire plane? Webb's response revealed the weight behind his expression. Because this wasn't about espionage, he said. This was a proof of concept, a field trial. They wanted to know if they could make a commercial jet vanish in front of the whole world, in real time, under scrutiny, with no trace. If Ghost Protocol could cloak MH370, it could be deployed anywhere, against enemy bombers, diplomatic transports, or even civilian flights targeted for disappearance, all without alerting a single radar operator. Webb explained that MH370 had been remotely piloted using Boeing's uninterruptible autopilot, a security measure designed to counter cockpit hijackings by allowing ground control to override pilot commands. In this case, the system had been reconfigured to accept satellite uplinks, allowing external operators to assume full control from thousands of miles away. "They flew it to Diego Garcia," he said firmly. "They landed it, processed the passengers, and either dismantled the aircraft or moved it to a secure facility. The debris that washed up later? Planted, dropped from high-altitude cargo planes, or deployed by submarine to reinforce the crash narrative." I asked Webb why he was risking his safety, his life, to reveal all this. "Because MH370 was just the beginning," he answered. "I've seen the procurement orders. Ghost Protocol isn't theory anymore. They're expanding production for operational use, commercial flights, military transports, possibly even spacecraft. They're building a system that can make anything, or anyone, disappear, whenever it suits them." Before we parted, Webb handed me a flash drive. It contained blueprints, diagnostic reports, and high-resolution satellite imagery showing an aircraft matching MH370's specifications parked at Diego Garcia, before and after the flight went missing. He made me promise, if anything happened to him, I had to release the data. 2 weeks later, Marcus Webb died in what Everett authorities called a tragic single-car accident. His vehicle left the road in clear conditions, struck a tree at an improbable angle, and burst into flames. The crash occurred less than 2 miles from his home, on a familiar road he had traveled safely for 15 years. I kept my promise. The first piece of MH370 wreckage appeared on July 29, 2015, on Réunion Island, a French territory in the western Indian Ocean, some 2,300 miles from the supposed crash zone. The object was a flaperon, part of the aircraft's wing. Malaysian and French authorities, along with Boeing engineers, confirmed the component matched MH370. Yet the discovery raised new doubts. Ocean current models indicated that debris from a southern Indian Ocean crash would take between 12 and 18 months to reach Réunion. MH370 had disappeared 16 months earlier, right on cue. But the flaperon's condition didn't fit expectations. Marine biologists noted irregularities in barnacle growth. The organisms showed signs of having grown in different salinity and temperature ranges, some more consistent with controlled environments than open ocean drift. A number of colonies had clearly been removed, then regrown under different conditions. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a marine biologist at the University of Cape Town, wasn't part of the official inquiry. Yet she conducted an independent analysis, published in a peer-reviewed journal. "The colonization patterns we observed," she wrote, "are more consistent with the debris having been stored in artificial seawater tanks, then introduced into ocean currents shortly before recovery." 6 weeks later, the paper was retracted. No explanation was provided. Would you like me to continue with the next section, covering the suspicious recovery of additional debris, the intelligence community's reaction, and the theory that MH370 may have been repurposed for further covert missions? The flaperon was only the beginning. Between 2015 and 2018, more than 30 additional debris fragments, allegedly from MH370, were recovered along the coastlines of Mozambique, Madagascar, South Africa, and Tanzania. These pieces included wing flaps, interior panels, engine cowlings, and even personal items belonging to passengers. Each discovery seemed to support the official version, that Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 had crashed in the southern Indian Ocean, and its wreckage was now drifting ashore, scattered by powerful currents. But once I obtained classified forensic analyses, reports never made available to the public, a far more troubling pattern began to emerge. Several fragments displayed precise tool markings, suggesting they had been deliberately cut from larger components rather than ripped away by crash impact. The edges were unnaturally straight and smooth, inconsistent with the chaotic tearing expected from a high-velocity oceanic collision. Even more suspicious, multiple pieces showed signs of prolonged freshwater exposure. Corrosion and mineral deposits matched conditions found not in the open sea, but in enclosed or inland aquatic environments. The most damning discovery came from isotopic analysis. Barnacle growth on many fragments revealed chemical signatures that did not align with open ocean seawater. Instead, they pointed to enclosed ecosystems, lagoons, and protected bays, particularly those found around coral atolls like the ones surrounding Diego Garcia. I began compiling the discovery data, mapping each debris find against maritime traffic records. A disturbing correlation emerged. Several debris discoveries occurred mere days after American or British naval operations had taken place in nearby waters. In October of 2017, satellite imagery captured U.S. Navy submarines surfacing off the coast of Mozambique. Just 48 hours later, local fishermen discovered wing debris nearby. Similar patterns repeated across Madagascar and Tanzania. Military presence, followed by conveniently timed debris finds. The final confirmation came from an unexpected source. In early 2018, a former U.S. Navy diver contacted me through secure channels. He claimed to have taken part in so-called deep-water salvage exercises in the Indian Ocean during 2016 and 2017. According to him, these exercises involved deploying actual aircraft wreckage from submarines at predetermined locations. The goal? To study how ocean currents would carry the fragments toward populated shorelines. We were told it was climate research, the diver told me during an encrypted call I couldn't record. Tracking currents and storm impacts, but the debris wasn't mock material, it was real. Some of it had serial numbers scraped or chemically altered. He provided GPS coordinates of the drop zones. Every single one matched known MH370 debris discovery locations. He also described seeing storage containers aboard submarines, sealed crates holding aircraft parts that had clearly been preconditioned in saltwater tanks. The fragments were coated in marine life, barnacles, algae, and coral, biological camouflage cultivated under controlled lab conditions. They even had biologists on board, he said. It was engineered to look like natural drift. Every detail, down to the maturity of the barnacles, was calculated. The conclusion was undeniable. The debris found across the Indian Ocean had not drifted there by accident. It was planted, piece by piece, using military resources, oceanographic data, and scientific precision, all to create a convincing lie. And then came the moment that changed everything. In March of 2019, exactly 5 years after MH370 vanished, I received an unmarked package. No return address. Inside was a single photograph, printed on matte stock, with no metadata or identifiers. It showed the interior of what looked like a military hangar, industrial lighting, concrete flooring, and overhead cranes. At its center, partially obscured by camouflage netting, stood the unmistakable silhouette of a Boeing 777. The tail number was missing, but the antenna configuration, wing structure, and fuselage scuff marks matched MH370 precisely. I had spent years studying every image of that aircraft. This was the same plane. But what left me frozen was the background architecture. The hangar's structural details, the specific layout of its ventilation system, the composition of the flooring, the custom hoists, matched top-secret blueprints I had previously acquired for underground hangars at Diego Garcia. The image was real. The aircraft the world believed had been lost to the sea had, in fact, been preserved. I spent weeks validating the photo with aviation experts, forensic analysts, and engineers familiar with U.S. military infrastructure. Each independently confirmed that the structure in the image matched Diego Garcia's maintenance facilities. And the aircraft? It was Sh-370. It hadn't been destroyed. It had been hidden. That changed everything. If the aircraft was intact, then so too might be the passengers, detained in black site facilities beyond the reach of courts, governments, or human rights watchdogs. The debris scattered across the Indian Ocean had not been proof of loss, but props in an elaborate performance. An illusion. It also meant the operation was still ongoing. Ghost Protocol wasn't just a technological anomaly. It was an active, operational system capable of making aircraft disappear on command. And it had already been tested in the most high-profile aviation disappearance of the 21st century. I began copying every piece of my research, preparing to release it globally. I contacted journalists, documentarians, intelligence contacts, anyone with the reach to expose what I had uncovered. Then, one quiet Tuesday morning in April of 2019, two men in suits knocked at my door. They introduced themselves as investigators from the FAA. Their credentials could not be verified. They confiscated every computer, every flash drive, every physical file I had collected. They informed me that my investigation was now classified under the Patriot Act, citing potential harm to aviation security. I was instructed to cease all research, to avoid press contact, and to report immediately if approached by any foreign agents. Their message was calm but absolute. Violating their directive, they said, could result in charges under the Espionage Act. Penalties included life imprisonment. 3 days later, I found a package in my mailbox. Inside was a flash drive labeled in block letters. 370 wasn't the first. The data on that drive included a decade's worth of satellite imagery, photos of aircraft that had vanished from public tracking systems across the globe. Each image was time-stamped and geotagged. Every aircraft had been relocated to military sites or isolated regions inaccessible to the public. The final images chilled me the most. They were dated for the future. They depicted aircraft that had not yet disappeared, already staged at remote installations still under construction. The implication was clear. More disappearances were planned. The same system used to erase MH370 was being refined, expanded, and deployed. What happened to flight MH370 wasn't an accident. It was a demonstration, a controlled vanishing to test a covert tool now capable of rewriting global events in the skies. Ghost Protocol has redefined airspace. Any flight, anywhere, can be made to vanish. Passengers are no longer protected by international law, civilian radar, or public accountability. They are pawns in a game played far above our heads, by forces that answer to no one. So, the next time an aircraft disappears without warning or trace, remember this. MH370 was not the first. It will not be the last. Project Sundial. Now, prepare yourself as we descend into another shadowed corridor of secrecy, one that doesn't reach into the skies, but beneath the Earth itself. Would you like me to continue rewriting the Project Sundial section next? Project Sundial Classification. Eyes Only. Internal Memo. March 18, 1954. From E. Teller, Project Director, to Project Staff. Operational Parameters. Gentlemen, what we are developing here marks the next evolution of nuclear deterrence. While our counterparts focus on building bigger warheads and faster delivery platforms, we are creating something far more precise: inevitability. Sundial 1 will serve as our first working prototype. The device houses a plutonium fusion core with an estimated yield of 5 megatons. But its innovation lies not in destructive force. It lies in the temporal detonation system. Instead of relying on traditional electronic timers or radio signals, Sundial uses ephemeris data, celestial alignments, as its activation trigger. This eliminates all potential vulnerabilities. No electronic circuits that could be disabled by electromagnetic pulses. No radio receivers that can be jammed. No human hands to betray the mechanism. The bomb will detonate only when a specific astronomical configuration occurs. Dr. Lawrence is assigned to oversee the cyclotron particle systems. Dr. Fuchs will handle containment dynamics and yield calibration. Dr. Warren will continue refining the astronomical trigger models. Remember, this project does not exist. We are ghosts working in the shadows. E. Teller, Dr. Ellis Warren, personal recording date, April 3, 1954. Location, Los Alamos, Site X9. Sound of papers rustling, a mug placed on metal. It's been 3 weeks since my arrival, and I'm only now beginning to understand the full scope of what we're building. This isn't just a bomb set to go off on a cosmic timer. It's something far more ambitious and far more unsettling. The device doesn't passively await celestial conditions. It actively monitors them. It's outfitted with an array of advanced sensors, cosmic radiation detectors, gyroscopes measuring Earth's axial drift, and rudimentary computing systems capable of analyzing solar wind intensity in real time. But here's what's keeping me up at night. None of the activation models are set for any imminent date. Every simulation I've reviewed centers on the year 2026. Specifically, December 21st, the winter solstice. That's when solar maximum will coincide with what Teller calls a galactic meridian crossing. I asked him, why that year? His response chilled me. Because that's when the universe will be listening most carefully. Ernest Lawrence has grown visibly uneasy. Yesterday, I found him in the cafeteria, staring blankly into his coffee, like a man haunted by something he can't forget. "Ellis," he said, as I sat across from him, "do you ever wonder if we're not building this for our government?" "What do you mean?" I asked. "I mean, who benefits from a bomb that won't go off for 70 years? Not the politicians running today's world, not the generals fighting today's wars." He leaned in. "What if we're building this for someone, or something, else entirely?" I tried to dismiss it as paranoia, but I had seen the targeting data. The blast simulations didn't center on Soviet cities. They were calibrated to regions within the American Southwest, specifically seismically active zones. When I raised this with Fuchs, he just gave a tight smile and said, "Not all weapons are meant to destroy enemies, Dr. Warren. Some are meant to reshape the world." Sundial test log. Classification beyond top secret. Date May 15, 1954. Test subject Sundial. 1. Prototype. Location Underground Test Chamber 12. Yield 0.5 kilotons, scaled test. Trigger. Criteria, lunar apogee plus solar flare intensity exceeding 2.5 x 10 to the negative 4th watts per square meter 1530 hours. Initialization complete. All sensors active. Device monitoring cosmic variables. 1545 hours. First anomaly detected. Radiation sensors registered background fluctuations not observed in any previous trial. Dr. Warren theorized that the device might be reacting to astrophysical phenomena not yet understood by science. 1612 hours. Unexpected activation sequence. Device armed itself before lunar conditions were met. A sudden solar flare spike may have triggered premature arming. Emergency protocols initiated. 1613 hours. Detonation. Yield was recorded at 2.3 kilotons, over 460% above projected output. Post-test analysis. The device bypassed our programmed trigger conditions. It seems to have responded to unknown astronomical variables, possibly gravitational waves or quantum field disturbances. Dr. Lawrence strongly recommended terminating the program. Dr. Teller insisted on constructing Sundial 2. Note: the chamber is now radioactive and will require 6 months of decontamination. 3 technicians have been hospitalized with acute radiation sickness. Dr. Ellis Warren. Personal recording date: June 8, 1954. Location: Los Alamos. Site: X9. Heavy breathing. Echoing footsteps. Something has gone terribly wrong. Sundial 2 failed 3 days ago, but not in the way we feared. The device didn't detonate. It disappeared. One moment, it was secured in Chamber 15, surrounded by monitoring systems. The next, it was gone. Nothing remained except a fused circle of scorched sand where the core had rested. The official explanation was spontaneous atomic dissolution via temporal feedback loop. But I was monitoring the data feed at the time. Seconds before the anomaly, every cosmic sensor in the lab spiked off the charts. Gravitational surges equal to stellar collision events, electromagnetic pulses that penetrated our shielding, and, strangest of all, our atomic clocks lost sync for exactly 17 seconds. Time fractured inside the test chamber. Teller was ecstatic. "Don't you see what this means?" he shouted, pacing. "We haven't just built a device that reacts to the universe. We've built one that communicates with it." He looked me dead in the eye. Sundial 2 didn't malfunction. It was recalled. "Recalled by whom?" I asked. "By when?" he corrected. "It jumped forward. It's waiting for us. In 2026. Teller may be losing his mind, but I fear he might be right. Ernest Lawrence resigned the next day. Before he left, he pulled me aside and whispered, "If you've got any sense left, Ellis, run." Dr. Ellis Warren, Personal Journal. Date: July 20th, 1954. Today, I discovered the shipping manifest. It had been hidden in Teller's office, disguised as geological survey materials and seismic monitoring equipment. But the weight specs, shielding notes, and handling instructions matched Sundial 3 perfectly. The bomb wasn't dismantled. It was relocated. According to the log, it was moved on July 15th to coordinates 33.3758 degrees north, 105.6890 degrees west, deep in New Mexico's Capitan Mountains. The team transporting it believed they were establishing an atmospheric research station. But I ran the location through geologic databases. The site is perched 7,200 feet above sea level, accessible only by a narrow mountain road prone to seasonal washouts. It's surrounded by iron-rich formations, natural electromagnetic shielding, and it sits atop a fragile fault system that could, under stress, initiate seismic chain reactions affecting much of the Southwest. The detonation date remains unchanged. December 21st, 2026. Winter solstice. Solar maximum. An astronomical alignment unprecedented in modern history. I confronted Teller. His response shook me more than anything I heard during the Manhattan Project. "Ellis," he said, "what if the Cold War isn't the war? What if everything we've done, every test, every lie, has been preparation?" "Preparation for what?" I asked. "For when they come back." He never explained who they were, but he handed me a folder. Inside were astronomical records dating back to 1908, the year of the Tunguska event. Something exploded over Siberia with the power of 1,000 atomic bombs, yet left no crater and no radiation. The file also contained records of other anomalies. The 1561 Nuremberg celestial phenomenon. Witnesses saw aerial objects fighting in the sky. The 1897 airship sightings across the American Midwest, decades before powered flight. The 1942 Battle of Los Angeles. Unknown craft resisted thousands of rounds from anti-air batteries. Every 70 to 80 years, Teller whispered, they return to check on us. In 1908, we were primitive, but then we split the atom, and they noticed. If I'm right, he said, they'll return in 2026. I asked again, who are they? Teller simply smiled and said, the same ones who taught us to split the atom. What if we didn't invent sundial? What if we discovered it? Recording cuts to static. FBI internal memo classification. Top secret date, August 12, 1954, to Director J. Edgar Hoover. From Agent Marcus Cole, Los Alamos Liaison. Ray, Dr. Ellis Warren, Security Assessment. Sir, pursuant to your directive, I have completed the psychological evaluation of Dr. Ellis Warren following his recent statements regarding Project Sundial and its supposed implications for national security. Assessment. Dr. Warren exhibits classic symptoms of paranoid delusion coupled with pronounced technical megalomania. His references to cosmic weapons and astronomical triggers suggest an elaborate internal mythology likely created to exaggerate his perceived role within the scientific establishment. Recommendation: immediate revocation of all security clearances and reassignment to a non-sensitive research role. While Dr. Warren does not appear to pose a direct threat to national security, he should be discreetly monitored in the event that he attempts to disclose classified material, even if filtered through the distortions of his psychological state. Note: Project Sundial remains officially categorized as a theoretical research initiative. Dr. Edward Teller has submitted written testimony affirming that all documentation pertaining to Sundial was either destroyed or declassified as of July 30, 1954. Case closed. No further investigation recommended. Agent Marcus Cole, Los Alamos Security Division. Handwritten note in margin, Hoover, ensure Warren disappears quietly. No headlines, no loose ends. Some truths are too dangerous to leak. Dr. Ellis Warren. Personal recording date, September 18, 1954. Location unknown. Audio quality poor. Whispered tone, background noise present. They came for me last night. Not bureau, not military, something else. Men in black suits, no IDs. But they knew specifics about my research that were never recorded, never even typed. They didn't arrest me, didn't threaten me. They talked. They spoke in quiet, measured tones about accidents, about how people who ask too many questions sometimes vanish, about how mountain roads in winter are notoriously unpredictable. Then they left. The message couldn't have been clearer. I'm leaving Berkeley tomorrow. Told the university I'm taking an indefinite leave for health reasons. No one questioned it. Words already spreading. Nervous breakdown, they're saying. Before I disappear, I need to make this clear, for the record. Sundial 3 is real. It lies buried in the Capitan Mountains at 33.3758 degrees north, 105.6890 degrees west. Approximately 200 feet below ground, inside a sealed lead-lined vault. It is programmed to activate on December 21, 2026, at exactly 9:16 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, triggered by a convergence of solar radiation levels, gravitational wave fluctuations, and deep space background radiation patterns. Estimated yield, 30 megatons. Enough to vaporize everything within 5 miles and initiate seismic resonance across Arizona, New Mexico, and West Texas. But I no longer believe it's just a bomb. It might be a signal, it might be something else entirely. Something ancient. I've hidden blueprints, simulations, and technical data in several physical caches. If you're hearing this, you found one of them. The others? Static interference, unclear coordinates. Find them, study them. Track down Sundial 3. Do it before December 21, 2026. Because what we created in 1954 wasn't designed to destroy the future. It was meant to welcome something from it. Recording ends abruptly. Missing person report. Berkeley Police Department. Date, October 3, 1954. Subject, Dr. Ellis Warren, age 31. Last known address, 1247, Vine Street, Berkeley, California. Physical description, height, 5 feet, 10 inches. Weight, 160 pounds. Hair, brown eyes, brown glasses, wire-rimmed. Last seen September 19th, loading personal belongings into a black 1951 Ford sedan. Reportedly informed colleagues at the University of California, Berkeley, that he was taking an extended leave of absence. Apartment was vacated without notice, but rent had been paid through December. Vehicle was discovered October 1st at the Desert View Motel in Flagstaff, Arizona. No signs of forced entry or struggle. Status: active missing persons case. Investigation suspended per federal request. Attached note: federal agencies advised minimizing inquiry due to potential links to classified national security matters. Chief Reynolds, recovered from archive.org, Wayback Machine. Original URL deleted. Date posted, March 15, 2025. Username, Desert Ghost 1954. Account deleted. Forum, Classified Documents Research Board. Site permanently taken offline. Subject, the Sundial Files, what they don't want you to know. I found something that's been buried for 70 years. My grandfather worked as a janitor at Los Alamos in the 50s. When he passed last year, I was cleaning out his house and found a metal lockbox beneath the floorboards. Inside were photocopied documents, old reel-to-reel tapes, and handwritten notes. All authored by someone named Dr. Ellis Warren. I spent months verifying them. The data checks out. The dates match. Even the astronomical models are accurate, down to decimal precision. But here's what's terrifying. According to these files, a 30-megaton nuclear device lies dormant in the Capitan Mountains, programmed to detonate on December 21, 2026, at 9:16 a.m. That's less than 2 years from now. I uploaded everything, files removed, but the coordinates remain. 33.3758 degrees north, 105.6890 degrees west. Someone needs to act now. They've kept this hidden for 70 years. How many other so-called theoretical devices are out there? Counting down. Update. USGS seismic monitoring stations are detecting consistent low-frequency pulses beneath the Capitan Range, every 72 hours, lasting 12 seconds. It's as if something underground is breathing. Update 2. I'm being followed. Black SUVs, federal plates. If anything happens to me, remember the coordinates. 33.3758 again, 105.6099 W. Update. 3. They found me. Final post. Timestamp, March 15, 2025, 11:47 p.m. Account. Deleted, March 16, 12:03 a.m. Files erased, March 16, 12:03 a.m. Entire forum archived and removed. March 16, 12:16 a.m. U.S. Geological Survey, Seismic Monitoring Division. Date, December 1, 2025. Subject, unusual seismic patterns. Capitan Mountains, New Mexico. Declassified under FOIA request, 2025-0847. Between March and November of 2025, seismic stations registered a repeating series of low-frequency tremors originating near 33.37 degrees north, 105.69 degrees west, at depths ranging from 150 to 200 feet below surface level. Pattern. Occurs every 72 hours. Duration, 12 seconds. Intensity, 1.2 to 1.8 magnitude. No industrial, geological, or construction activity reported in the vicinity. Preliminary conclusion. Artificial origin. Simultaneous electromagnetic interference recorded. Compass malfunctions. Radio disruption reported across several bands. Dr. Sarah Chen, Senior Seismologist, USGS Earthquake Hazards Program. Margin, note, forwarded to DHS and Department of Energy. Something is down there, and it's waking up. SC, recovered from damaged field recorder location, Capitan Mountains, New Mexico. Date, found December 20th, 2026. Audio distorted. Wind howling. Distant footsteps on gravel. Unknown male, elderly. Can you see it from here? Unknown. Female, younger. The entrance is about 50 yards ahead, radiation spiking. Male, 72 years. It's been waiting there, watching. Female, you're sure about the countdown. Male, December 21st, 9:16 a.m., solar peak, galactic meridian. Warren's math was exact, metal detector chimes. Female, there, that's the shaft. Oh my God, look at it, like it was built to last forever. Male, it was. Teller knew, he always knew this day would come. The only question now, are we here to stop it, or to witness it? Long silence. Wind intensifies. A deep hum begins to rise. Female, the display's active, countdown engaged. Male, how long? Female, 14 hours, 23 minutes, 17 seconds. Male, then it's too late. But maybe that was the plan all along. Female, what do you mean? Male, what if sundial was never a weapon? What if it's a beacon, a message, a response? Something's been waiting 70 years to receive it. Instruments whir, sensors activate. Sky begins to shift. Female, look at the sky. Male, my God, those lights. Female, the same lights people described in 1908. Male, and again in 1942, end of recording. They're here, for the activation. Recording quality degrades rapidly. Female voice, urgent, distorted. We need to leave, now. Male voice, calm, resolute. No. This is what Warren died trying to warn us about. Someone has to stay. Someone has to witness. What happens when the universe finally answers the call? Sound of approaching aircraft, or something far less familiar? Female voice, barely audible, counting. 9 minutes. 8. Recording terminates abruptly. Classified briefing document date, December 22nd, 2026. Classification above top secret, cosmic clearance required. Subject, Capitan Mountains incident, post-event analysis. At precisely 9:16 a.m., Mountain Standard Time on December 21st, 2026, seismic monitoring networks throughout the southwestern United States recorded a massive subterranean detonation at coordinates 33.3758 degrees north, 105.6890 degrees west, in the Capitan Mountains of New Mexico. Official public statement. Authorities cited an undetected natural gas buildup as the cause of a geological explosion. No radioactive materials were involved. A precautionary evacuation was issued. Actual summary, at exactly the programmed time, the Sundial 3 device activated. Yield estimates reached 32.7 megatons. Seismic shock waves triggered secondary fault disruptions across 3 states. A localized electromagnetic pulse disabled electrical systems within a 200-mile radius for 17 minutes. Eyewitnesses described aurora-like sky anomalies, sudden shifts in gravitational weight, and irregularities in time perception. Primary anomaly. At the moment of detonation, both ground-based observatories and orbital satellite systems detected structured objects in high Earth orbit. Entities not visible in scans conducted 24 hours earlier. These objects maintained geosynchronous position for 72 hours before vanishing entirely. On-site findings. No debris from Sundial 3 remained. The device was not destroyed, it was removed, cleanly, precisely, by unknown agents or mechanisms. Current status. The sundial program has been retroactively elevated to top-tier black classification. Personnel with operational knowledge have been reassigned or retired under indefinite NDAs with threat of prosecution. Dr. Ellis Warren's body remains unrecovered. Neither his remains nor the rumored caches of classified documents have ever been located. Final note: recent deep space observations reveal non-natural structures within the asteroid belt, between Mars and Jupiter, objects not previously catalogued. Radio telescopes have begun receiving consistent, repeating signals from their vicinity. The signal cycles repeat every 72 hours. Something is transmitting, and we may have just answered. Classified addendum. Director's eyes only. Date: January 15, 2027. Sir, you requested further investigation into potential additional sundial units. After an exhaustive review of both declassified archives and previously redacted files, several connected programs have emerged. Operation Hourglass, 1952-56. Time-based detonation systems, officially terminated. Project Meridian, 1958-62. Orbital trigger platforms, status unknown. Sundial 4 through Sundial 7, 1955-57. No confirmed deployments, no records of deactivation. The most disturbing find is a handwritten note recovered from Edward Teller's private safe following his death in 2003. His final journal entry, dated September 30th, 1954, reads, "Warren thought we'd built only one. Poor, idealistic Warren. Who would rely on a single beacon to deliver a message so important? The others are asleep, distributed across the earth, awaiting their own celestial summons. 2026 was not the conclusion, it was the introduction. The universe functions on clocks older than civilization and far more precise. If Teller's notes are genuine, then Sundial 3 was merely one of many. Dozens more may lie dormant beneath our feet, each awaiting unique cosmic alignments, each functioning not as a weapon, but as a transmission point. I have begun preliminary scans, cross-referencing Teller's vague location hints. Because of the potential for mass panic and the classified nature of this discovery, I recommend maintaining maximum discretion. The next qualifying astronomical event occurs August 12, 2045. A planetary conjunction coinciding with the solar maximum. That leaves us 19 years. Assuming we want to find them. Director Collins, Deep Projects Division. Final entry. Location undisclosed audio recording. Recovered March the 21st, 2027. Source: abandoned classified facility audio clear. Female speaker: my name is Dr. Elena Vasquez. I was once a nuclear physicist. Now, investigator of truths too dangerous to be convenient. If you're hearing this, you've found the facility we were forced to abandon when our research crossed a line even the government wouldn't acknowledge. For 3 months, we studied the blast readings from the Capitan Mountains. What we discovered: it wasn't a detonation, it was an extraction. The crater was not formed by pressure or heat, but by something being drawn upward. Radiation patterns weren't chaotic. They were symmetrical, geometrically patterned, as though gamma radiation itself had been shaped into a message. Here's what they won't tell you. By combining Warren's equations with Teller's lost notes, we located 17 additional sundial devices. Each lies hidden across the American Southwest. Each emits a low-frequency tremor every 72 hours. Each pulse grows slightly stronger as its designated date approaches. The next will activate on August 12, 2045, in the Nevada desert. After that, September 23, 2051, Colorado Rockies. October 31, 2057, Arizona Highlands. These are not bombs, they are invitations, and something out there has been waiting, patiently, for us to say yes. Sound of papers rustling. We've archived everything. Mathematical confirmation that each sundial site aligns with naturally occurring energy nodes. Orbital imagery showing their positions form geometric patterns matching ancient star charts. Evidence none of these placements originated from modern civilization. But the most chilling evidence came from a collection of Edward Teller's final voice recordings. He made them mere weeks before his death. Supposedly senile at 95. He was not senile. They reached out in 1952, not with ships, not with words, in visions, in blueprints, in sudden, perfect comprehension. They showed me fusion. They showed me sundial. They've been nudging us forward for centuries. The devices? They aren't ours. Each is a node, a portal, a foothold. Sundial 3 was first contact. Once the rest go active, they'll come through. That message was the last thing he ever recorded. Attached was a sealed envelope. Inside, coordinates labeled Control 0, an underground base built in 1953, declared destroyed in 57. It's not destroyed, it's still there, beneath Mount Wilson, California. We tried reaching it. 12 miles out, our vehicle shut down. Radios failed. Clocks glitched. Time looped. We witnessed shadows reversing direction. The sun moved backward across the sky. We retreated. But not before seeing it. A perfectly circular entrance bored into granite. Too precise for nature, too ancient for mankind. And from within, we heard it. Breathing, something vast, waiting. Footsteps, echoes. I've hidden redundant archives in this facility, inside walls beneath the floor, fused into the foundation itself. If you're hearing this, you've found one. Now you must choose. Dismiss us. Write this off as madness. Return to your life, comforted by disbelief. Or accept what you now know. We were never alone. And the countdown ticking beneath our feet was never ours to stop. It was always theirs to begin. Everything we thought we understood about human technological evolution, nuclear development, the space race, the Cold War, and the atomic age, was never entirely ours. These milestones were not milestones of destiny, but phases of construction, guided by intelligences that regard humanity not as the architects of history, but as laborers within it. They gave us the tools. We built what they required. And now, one device at a time, they are returning to claim what we assembled. The next activation is scheduled for August 12, 2045, 18 years from today. That grants us 18 years to comprehend, to prepare, to decide. When the final sundial awakens, will we stand with them or against them? But perhaps that decision was made long ago. Perhaps it happened in 1952 when Edward Teller dreamed of equations no other human had ever conceived. Or in 1947, when something unearthly fell from the sky over New Mexico, prompting our government to obsess over materials we couldn't explain. Or maybe it began in 1908, when something detonated above Tunguska with the force of 1,000 nuclear warheads, decades before we even understood the atom. Recording degrades. I can hear helicopters now. Government aircraft, almost certainly. Though, at this point, I'm no longer certain which government they serve. The line between human and non-human authority may be thinner than we ever imagined. If they come for me, if I disappear, as Ellis Warren did, remember this: truth does not die. Even when the voices that speak it are silenced, truth buries itself deep, and it rises when the time is right. The sundial devices are still active, still counting down, still transmitting, patiently, steadily into the stars, and something out there continues to listen. December 21st, 2026 was never the conclusion. It was the prologue. Welcome to the future Edward Teller engineered. Welcome to a world where the sky finally answers. Recording ends. Helicopters audible overhead. Eyes only. Cosmic clearance required. Date, December 21st, 2027. To the President of the United States. Subject, 1-year review, Capitan Mountains. Incident. Sir, as instructed, this memorandum provides a classified assessment of the sundial program and its implications for global security and interstellar governance. Current operational overview. 16 sundial devices remain active, each stationed at classified coordinates. All continue transmitting encoded, non-random signals at exact intervals. Global radio observatories have confirmed corresponding responses from multiple solar system locations. 3 scientific teams assigned to decode the sundial signals have gone missing under circumstances inconsistent with natural or criminal explanation. Recent event, on December 21st, 2027, 1 year to the second following the Capitan detonation, all sundial devices simultaneously broadcasted a signal lasting precisely 17 minutes and 16 seconds. The transmission was detected by every major observatory on Earth. No cryptographic method has yet yielded a translation. Within hours, structured communications began appearing on restricted military satellite frequencies previously deemed impenetrable. The messages were written in flawless English. They are currently under analysis by a multi-agency task force, including NASA, the Department of Defense, and several unnamed entities. Excerpted message received, December 21st, 2027, 21:16. GMT, Phase 1, integration successful. Human technological development tracking within parameters. Initiate Phase 2. Acceleration recommended based on current sociopolitical variables. Optimal window detected for transition. Assessment. Based on all available intelligence, it is my professional judgment that human governments, including our own, no longer maintain full authority over terrestrial or orbital operations. The sundial program was never intended as a weapons initiative. It was an infrastructure project, executed by humans, but architected by non-human design. Over the past 70-plus years, we unknowingly constructed a planet-scale communications array. Its purpose still unknown, but undeniably active. Recommended actions. Immediate establishment of official contact protocols with non-human intelligences. Reassessment of national defense strategies under the assumption that contact has already occurred, outside the oversight of elected institutions. The next sundial activation will occur in 18 years. By then, the line between human and non-human technology may be meaningless. We built the system that summoned them. Now we must decide. Can we live alongside what has answered? Respectfully, Director James Morrison, Department of Cosmic Defense. Handwritten note, Jim, burn every copy. Official cover story, meteorology research. Case closed. Democracy can't survive this truth. POTUS. Inscription discovered, carved into rock face. Capitan Mountains, New Mexico. Date found, December 21st, 2054. Occasion, 27th anniversary of the first contact. If you're reading this, the final device has activated, and you've survived what came after. My name was Ellis Warren. I died in 1954. But death, I've learned, is not always terminal. They found me in the desert that October, just as I always believed they would. But instead of erasing me, they offered a choice. Join them, or watch from the sidelines as they shaped a future with or without us. I chose to join, not out of trust, but necessity. Someone had to understand what they really intended. Someone had to prepare the human race. In the decades since, I have learned what they are: not conquerors, not invaders, gardeners. Earth is not their first garden, and we are not their first crop. Across the galaxy, they have tended civilizations, nudging them toward knowledge, energy, and exploration, preparing them to become useful. Useful for what? To build, to connect, to link the stars. We were their builders, and we never knew. The sundial devices were only phase 1. Every satellite, every quantum system, every sensor array, all designed to specs not written on Earth. All part of a machine we never recognized. But you recognize it now. Now, in 2054, with the final device awakened and their ships descending visibly across the skies. You understand what we built during the atomic age: a framework, an invitation, a key. Do not resist them. Not because they are powerful, but because resistance is senseless. You cannot defy a system you were born inside. You cannot fight an invasion that happened generations ago. Instead, learn, partner, evolve, because there is still choice, even now. Fewer options than we once had, but not none. The cosmos is older than imagination, and full of intelligence far beyond our reach. We are not its masters, but we need not be its prisoners. We can be its allies, if we are willing to admit we've always been children, playing with tools we never understood, watched over by parents we never knew we had. The Sundial Directive is complete. Welcome to your future. Dr. Ellis Warren, 1923-1954. Final transmission. Broadcast on all frequencies. Date, December 21st, 2015. Time, 9:16 a.m. GMT occasion, 100 years. Since Project Sundial began, this is Mission Control, not the one you remember, but the one that has guided your species since it first looked upward and asked, "Are we alone?" You were never alone. The integration is complete. All 17 sundial nodes have fulfilled their role. The grid is active. It spans your planet, your system, and soon, your neighbors. Humanity has passed its final assessment. Welcome to the Galactic Network. Your education begins now.